Hello, welcome to another edition of Jazz Smack. And tonight we are going to talk about the scoring numbers for the Utah Jazz when they are playing road games and the meaningful improvement we have seen in those scoring numbers to this point. So we're going to talk about that. We're going to look at the numbers and we're going to look at the past numbers, the present numbers. We're going to dissect it. We're also going to talk about a bit of the last number of games the Jazz have played, the development situation, what has gone right, what has gone wrong, and what players have shown meaningful, the good and the bad. So let's talk about it.
Jazz Smack, NBA and Utah Jazz basketball.
So, right before Thanksgiving, I did a podcast pointing out that the Utah Jazz in road games, the team was scoring, the scoring at home versus the scoring on the road was vastly different. And at the time when I first started dissecting these numbers and looking at these numbers, I quite frankly, at that time, I couldn't believe it. I mean, the numbers were so starkly different that it was almost unimaginable that they could be this different. So at that time, when I did this shortly before Thanksgiving, the Utah Jazz were scoring 128.4 points per game at home and 106.4 points per game on the road. For those of you who are not doing the math in your head, that is a 22 point per game difference in home versus road. So those are the numbers right before Thanksgiving. Now, I just took a look at these numbers again and was going through them, and we are seeing monster improvement. Vastly better. The Jazz have become vastly better at scoring the ball in road games. Now, the differential, the Jazz are still number one in the league in home versus road. But they got off to such a lousy start with scoring 106.4 points per game on the road that you can understand why they are still number one in the league in difference between home and road to this point. But those numbers have climbed closer and closer together because the Jazz are playing much better offense on the road. So let's take a look at exactly those numbers so that you can kind of see where they are and how they compare to the other teams in the league to this point. So let's take a look at those numbers here. So right now, the Jazz are number 2 in the NBA in home scoring offense. Denver's number 1, the Jazz are number 2, and the Jazz score 125.8 points per game at home right now throughout this season. That's the average to this point. But their road scoring, remember, I just said when I checked it, when I ran the numbers right before Thanksgiving, the Jazz were scoring 106.4 points per game on the road. Right now, their road scoring average is 112.5 points per game on the road. So they still have a difference of 13.3, but they got off to such a bad start in road scoring offense that I'm not surprised that it's still 13.3, but they have improved immensely. And we're going to look at the scoring road offense scoring over the last 10 road games in a minute. But just to give that reference, 13.3 compared to right before Thanksgiving, it was 22. That's a huge improvement. And the Jazz are certainly trending in the right direction because it's so important. I mean, if you're only scoring 106.4 points per game on the road in scoring offense, it gives you almost no opportunity to win games. It gives you almost no opportunity to even be competitive in games. So that's why this is so important. Even if they don't win these games, it means that they're actually in games and it's so much better, like I've said a million times before, from a development standpoint, from a learning standpoint, to be in games, to be in competitive games where it's not just, you're not playing these meaningless blowout minutes. From a learning standpoint, you have to have the games competitive. And this gives the Jazz an opportunity to be more competitive in those road games. Yeah, is their road record going to be good this season? No, it's not. They're going to struggle on the road. But if they can be in those games and have meaningful competitive minutes for the guys to learn, that's better. That's vastly, vastly better than being in blowouts from the first quarter on. So we are seeing it trend in the right direction. Absolutely 100%. This is a trend in the right direction because we're seeing meaningful improvement as a team. And yes, this not only reflects on the team as a whole, but obviously the individual players need to be playing better in order to give the team an opportunity to be better as a whole. So we're seeing that. But the one thing that's interesting here is, so there's still obviously a vastly difference. Number 2 on this list in difference between home and road is the New Orleans Pelicans. And the Jazz are a 13.3 difference between home and road. Pelicans are 8.9. So that's still, that's 4.4 points per game difference between New Orleans and Jazz and home versus road. And that's still, the Jazz are obviously number 1 by a mile in this category to this point. Now, 22 was absurd. That number right before Thanksgiving of 22 point per game difference, that was just absolutely ridiculous. But the Jazz are improving. So 13.3 is a lot better than 22, and I anticipate this number continuing to get closer and closer together in home versus road. Yeah, the Jazz have such a massive home court advantage. We all know that. And are you really surprised that the top 2 teams in the league in terms of road scoring, in terms of home scoring, are Denver number 1 and Utah Jazz number 2, the 2 teams with that substantial inherent elevation advantage? No, I'm not as surprised. And quite frankly, those 2 teams should be at the top of that home scoring year in and year out, because those 2 teams should absolutely take advantage of that elevation advantage, that thin air. Those 2 teams should take advantage of it. They are taking advantage of it, and we want to see the Utah Jazz at near the top of home scoring offense year in and year out. So I commend both those franchises for being that thus far. Good job. But as you can see, what's interesting about this is 20 of the 30 teams have better home versus road offense. And I'm surprised it's not more than that. I'm surprised it's not like 25 of 30 have better offense at home versus road. But so the Jazz are clearly number 1. Then you start to get some jumbled up here. The Lakers, obviously that team has a massive home court advantage, really good home support. There's an 8.2 point per game difference in home versus road for that offense. As you'd expect. But let's look at down here at the end. And quite frankly, there are very few teams there are only 2 teams with meaningful road offense that's substantially better than the home offense. And one of those is the Minnesota Timberwolves. The Minnesota Timberwolves score 116.6 points per game at home and 123.7 on the road. That is remarkable. That's not so great for their home court advantage in the playoffs, but that just shows, that team can go on the road and they're fully capable of scoring in pretty much any road environment that they encounter. If they're doing that well on the road to this point in the season, they can certainly score on the road, and that's truly impressive. 123.7 is an incredible number for road scoring offense. Absolutely incredible. And the Chicago Bulls are there as well. 113.6 at home and 120.8 on the road. 7.2 points per game more on the road than at home. That's truly amazing. Absolutely, truly amazing. But you see some of these teams in the middle that are, that are roughly equal home versus road. You have OKC 122.3 at home and 120.5 on the road. I mean, obviously really solid numbers. And the other one to really look at is the Houston Rockets, 119.6 at home, 118.4 on the road. I mean, those are both terrific numbers too. I mean, really good. So those two teams are noticeably very good because they're really high. And also, the Denver Nuggets, 126.1 at home and 122.7 on the road. I mean, those are really good. And the Knicks, 121.7 at home, 117.8 on the road. So there are some teams that really stand out in this that are doing really well, both home and road. But still, the Jazz, from the Jazz standpoint, the gap is closing between home and road is what we want to see. And we don't, yes, from when I originally looked at this, they were 128.4 at home. Now they're at 125.8. So part of the shrinkage between home and road has it their home scoring has come down a little bit, but the bigger factor is that their road scoring has gone up significantly. And we're going to look at the next 10 games, the last 10 road games next, to show you what has transpired in terms of points per game on the road over the past 10. So let's look at that now. So as you can see here, over the last 10 games, the Jazz have averaged, over the last 10 road games, the Jazz have averaged 117.8 points per game. That's a really good number for this Utah Jazz team. You look at Golden State, 10 games ago, at Golden State, they scored 117 in a loss. At Brooklyn, 9 games ago, they won and scored 123. At New York, they scored 112 in a loss. At Memphis, they scored 130 in a win. At Denver, they scored 112 in a loss. At San Antonio, they scored 127 in a win. At the Clippers, 101. That wasn't a good game. At Golden State, 114. At Portland, 117. At Oklahoma City, 125. So all those games ended in loss that I just mentioned. The last 2, 4, 5. The last 5 road games, they all ended in a loss. But still, the 125 against OKC, 117 at Portland, even the 114 at Golden State, at least those numbers are good enough to where it gives you a chance to be competitive and gives you an opportunity possibly to win a game if you can show a good showing on the defensive end of the court. You take that OKC game. Now, that was obviously an overtime game, so that aids the scoring numbers for the Utah Jazz because it ended up in an overtime game. But the Jazz, that was I would classify that game at OKC was the best road loss, the best loss period of the season. I mean, it was a super competitive game. The guys played really hard. They played hard on the defensive end. I mean, it's not always great. We know the defensive struggles of the Jazz, but they played hard, and they played hard throughout the roster. And they were competitive. They were tough for the most part. They played hard, and they had every opportunity to win that game. Shea makes that free throw area jumper at the end to send the game into overtime, and the Jazz fall in overtime. But that's a win for the Jazz. To be in that type of environment against the defending world champions, to be in that type of competitive environment where the guys are putting it all out there and trying to win that game, and even if they do fall, fine. That's okay. It's a learning experience. This year is another one of those development years, learning experience. To be in that type of a learning environment, in that type of a competitive situation, that's great. That's what you want. So I commend the guys. That was the best loss of the season to this point, that OKC game. Great game. Very entertaining. So that's where the Jazz are trending. And this is really positive for the remainder of the season. Certainly, I don't foresee any of this changing. I think these numbers are going to stay somewhat consistent to around the 115 to 117 type range for road scoring throughout the rest of the season. I don't think we're going to revert back to that 106 points per game road scoring. I don't think that's going to be the case. I think the Jazz are playing well enough now, assuming no injuries or anything like that, if the roster can stay somewhat consistent, that I think we're going to see the Jazz be more competitive in the road games. Now, is their record going to magically improve on the road? No, it's not. It's not going to do that. The Jazz right now are +3 at home versus road, and they're still going to struggle on the road. That's to be expected. I mean, to expect the Jazz to go out and win road games right now, that's far-fetched. It's not going to happen. That's just not in the cards at this point in time. They're going to still go through a lot of struggles in road games, but they should be able to keep those games, in terms of wins and losses, they're going to go through struggles, but they should be able to keep those games competitive, much more so than the early games in the season. So that's where that stands. Concerning the last number of games, I want to talk about a little bit about Isaiah Collier. Isaiah Collier, we've seen Isaiah still get consistent minutes at the point guard position, and his numbers, his field goal percentage numbers, have been drastically better this year compared to last year. I mean, his field goal percentage is much higher, his three-point percentage is much higher, his free throw percentage is roughly the same, but he's drastically improved. But it isn't because he's a better shooter. He's being much more selective in his field goal attempts, which is what he actually needs to do at this point in time, considering his struggles as a perimeter jump shooter. For Collier to be effective, his shot attempts need to come in the paint, and that's what he's doing. That is what he's doing, and that's why his field goal percentage has climbed from 42.2 in his rookie season to so far this season 51.5. Now, most guys do make a jump in field goal percentage from their rookie season. That's clearly, that's to be expected. Their field goal percentage should continue to climb. First, second, third years, it should improve. We want to see improvement. Sometimes there can be that second year lull. We saw that with Walker, but overall, it's to be expected to see the field goal percentage numbers improve. And to Collier's credit, he's done that, but it's been through shot selection. He's being much more judicious in his shot selection. You can look at his three-point field goals per attempt. Last year was a 2.4. This year it's a 1.2. He's not shooting the threes. And yeah, this absolutely does hurt the offense too, the Jazz offense, because Collier's playing enough minutes now that he's being scouted. He's certainly being scouted by the other teams. I mean, he played 26 minutes every game last year on average. This season, he's playing 23. So he's playing enough to being scouted, and teams know that he's not looking to shoot those perimeter shots. So the threes that he is shooting, very selective. They're typically wide open, and he certainly do a better job of knocking those down. And if he were to go back to last season or even shoot more threes, his percentages are going to decline. His overall field goal percentage is going to decline. His three-point percentage is going to decline. So for Collier to be successful on the offensive end right now in terms of scoring the ball, he needs to do what he's doing, which is get into the paint. The majority of his field goal attempts need to be with his feet in the paint, and that's what he's doing. So we'll see. We'll see if I still think that he needs to get a shooting coach and work on mechanics in the offseason. And I thought that's what he needed to do this past offseason. He didn't do that. He went the repetitions route. We'll see what he does this coming summer. And if he actually gets with a shooting coach and tries to tweak his mechanics to get his mechanics better, because I still believe that that's what he needs to do to order to be a more of a volume shooter from the perimeter at times, so that he can keep teams honest on the defensive end. I think that he needs to still tweak his mechanics. He went the repetitions route this past summer. We'll see what he does this coming summer. But so far, in terms of the shot selection, I I'm in favor of it. I'm happy that he's doing that rather than just jacking a bunch of perimeter shots that he knows that he can't make. So we'll see what happens. So that's Isaiah Collier. The other person I want to mention is there's another couple. We've seen Cody over the last few games get some minutes. Now, we all expected going into the season that Will Hardy's gonna shuffle lineups. The guys will get an opportunity. They'll get pulled. He'll give other guys an opportunity. But Cody's been getting games recently, and some of that is just that Ace hasn't played. Ace has been out of the lineup, so this gives an opportunity to Cody. And to give Cody credit, prior to the season, I did a podcast and I said that for Cody to be successful in the offensive end right now and give himself an opportunity to be on the court and play defense, where I think he can help the team, he needs to get out on the break and he needs to run, because he can score in transition, not shoot threes in transition, but run to get layups and dunks. And he's done that over the last few games. He's got a bunch of dunks off both alley-oops and just off of a traditional fast break situation where he's getting the ball in the break and he's going up and dunking it. So he's been successful in that. And the number of dunks he's been able to put down over the last few games has been actually very impressive. But we'll see how that continues. I mean, honestly, I think that once Ace comes back, that's going to certainly cut into Cody's minutes. Bryce is getting a bunch of minutes right now, and Bryce has been putting up better numbers recently with the more playing time. That's certainly quite evident, and we know that Bryce can certainly put the ball in the basket, and he's been able to get some other, we want to see improvement from Bryce on the defensive end. I certainly think that Bryce is showing that. He's certainly showing it with better defensive effort, better defensive technique. I think that Bryce has certainly improved in all of those areas so far this season compared to where he was last season. So that's encouraging from Bryce's standpoint. So good for Collier, field goal percentages. Good for Cody, running a lane, getting transition baskets, allowing you to spend more time on the court so that you can show what you can do on the defensive end. Good for Bryce, being able to still can put the ball in the basket. Better effort on the defensive end compared to last year. That's good for Bright. And the other one is recently we've seen Walt get increased playing time. And we know from his Florida days, from his college days, that Walt is fully capable of making big shots, especially from the perimeter. We've also seen he's fully capable and fully comfortable with the floater game in the lane. He's made some very difficult floaters where he's put a lot of air under the ball, and he seems very comfortable shooting that shot. We've seen him do it. We've also seen him go through some struggles, as you'd expect with a rookie player. Some struggles where, I think it was against OKC where he shot like 3 air balls in a row. So be it. That's okay. Against OKC, I thought his defensive effort, his defensive intensity was there. Against Dallas, there were some frustrating possessions where right now, Walt is inconsistent with his defensive effort, his intensity, his grit. He needs to be consistent on the defensive end of the court. The Jazz still struggle defensively. We know that. We know they struggle as a team. We know that they struggle as individuals by and large. But for Walt to play, I want Hardy to insist that he plays with effort, intensity, grit on the defensive end. And that's where I've seen inconsistencies from Walt still. Against Dallas, I was not pleased with it. I know the kid can make shots. I wanted the Jazz to draft him. And I just want to see improvement. I want to see improvement in effort, intensity, and grit on the defensive end. Just consistency. That's what I'm looking for from Walt. And I hope that Will Hardy holds him to that and forces him to do that. And he seems to be getting more and more comfortable. I have high hopes for Walt as a long-term piece for the Utah Jazz. I think he has leadership capability. He certainly has big shot capability. So I have high hopes, and I'd like Walt to earn consistent minutes moving forward. So we'll see where that stands. Keontae. Let's talk a bit about Keontae. This last game against Dallas, I thought was a terrific game by Keontae George. He shot 8 for 12 from the field, 2 for 3 from the free throw line, 19 points on that 8 for 12 shooting, 7 assists, no turnovers. That is a terrific stat line for Keontae George. That is a winning stat line for the Utah Jazz from Keontae George. I don't care if he scores 28, 30 points a game, scoring an efficient 19 points, 7 assists, no turnovers, 8 of 12 shooting, 2 for 3 from the free throw line. That is a good game. That is a very, very good game. That's a very, very good game from Keontae George for the Utah Jazz. That's what I want to see. Against OKC, Keontae consumed 30 possessions. 30. That's too many. I don't care if he scored a ton of points. 30 possessions is a lot. He had quite a few assists, but he had a bunch of turnovers. 19 points on 8 for 12 shooting with 7 assists and no turnovers is a better game than him scoring a ton of points. That's a winning stat line. That's a great game. And that's what I hope we see more of from Keontae moving forward this season from an offensive standpoint. He also came up with several steals in that game. So Keontae played a magnificent game against the Dallas Mavericks, and I commend him for that. Terrific game. Those games where he takes good shots and he shoots a high percentage and he gets his assist without turning the ball over a ton and he comes up with a few steals, that's winning basketball. Period. That's winning basketball. That's what Keontae George needs to play. That's how he needs to play. That's the way to win games. That's good for the Utah Jazz. So again, absolutely terrific game from Keontae George against the Dallas Mavericks. And I think that's about it for this version of Jazz Smack. But the games, these recent games, they've becoming more and more interesting. As the Jazz become more competitive, even in the losses, these games get more interesting. It's some of those games where it's a blowout. It's a chore to watch those games. I think we all feel that. So we want to see the games competitive, win or lose. It's better to see the games competitive. From a learning standpoint, it's just better to see competitive games. So let's just hope for that for the future, for the upcoming games this season. Hope for no injuries. Let's hope for the health for the Utah Jazz, because still a lot of games left. We have not yet reached the halfway point. We are approaching that. Only a few games left to the halfway point, but we like to see the improving play on the road. That is certainly a huge deal for this team, for this young, developing team. So anyway, for those watching on YouTube, please like, share, and subscribe. You can also follow us on X at Jazz Smack, and we will talk to everybody later.